All right, everyone. Welcome to Rooted and Rising. I'm so excited about today's episode because I have a wonderful guest here. She is an amazing person. I'll let her introduce herself at some point, but we'll jump right into the episode, actually. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Choman. First of all, let me just preface by saying thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited. For those who probably don't know, Choma is like my friend and my sister. So my name is Maimunat Alex Adeomi. I'm a global health physician and strategist, and I have focused a lot really on health system strengthening over the past, I'll say, over 20 years of my career, having pivoted from clinical medicine. That's my passion, and somehow I'm still sticking to it. Let's see how long that takes.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, welcome, Emuna. I'm so excited to have you on Rooted and Rising today. You're actually our first guest of the podcast, so clap.
Woohoo.
Yay. But as Mimuna said, she's a physician and public health practitioner, and I believe you have built bridges between two continents, right? So the US and Africa, maybe Nigeria in particular, and a lot of your work is rooted in community and global health. But before we kind of get into maybe if we want to talk about work, we don't have to. But I want you to tell, our listeners just a little bit about who you are beyond any job title, just kind of what are the things that make you you.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question because I think a lot of times as professionals, you get caught up in identifying yourself by what you do, your job title. So for me, I would say I'm a doer. I'm somebody who's really passionate about social justice, underserved populations. And
Mhm.
that has largely driven what I've done, whether it's as a physician or as a global health practitioner or as a Rotarian or in all the other things that I volunteer my time in. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I have two boys aged 14 and 10. So I have that that aspect of my life
That
that keeps me
sounds
on my toes.
fun. That
I
sounds
know, fun. Tell me again. Try teenage boys. They will test you, but it's something I wouldn't trade for because a lot of times I think, we question, and, I've often joked with you where I said I'm questioning my life choices sometimes. But honestly, I wouldn't trade any of those things. My journey, I've had a lot of both personally and professional, a lot of curves, bumps, twists and turns in the road without necessarily knowing where I was heading, but I just kept at it by the grace of God. I'm a person of faith as well.
Mhm.
So those things I think have really shaped into who I am and how I want to show up with
Mm.
the time that I have in the world is do things, be good, try to make a difference, and care about those who are less privileged because everything we have is really a privilege.
Mm. I love that. And I love that you even brought up like your faith and how important that is to you and how it's shaped your approach to life, really. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, right? So what do you think are some of your early influences, maybe growing up in Nigeria? And then maybe tell us a little bit about what are the particular moments or the people that you think shaped your decision to go into the field that you're in.
Yeah. I knew early enough that I wanted to be a physician. I still try to think back, like if I really had one person who influenced me, and I don't think there really was one person. It was
Mm.
just again that need for wanting to do much more. And I think it doesn't help also that as a Nigerian, right?
Yeah.
You had very few career choices. If it wasn't doctor, it was engineer, it was lawyer, maybe accountant, but everything else was secondary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it was just assumed that if you were a certain way or considered bright, not that I'm saying I'm bright or brilliant or something
It's
like that.
okay. You can say you're bright and
I'm
brilliant.
just saying, right, that there are just certain paths that are laid out for you. So early on, I knew I wanted to do something in the health sciences, specifically as a physician. I also really love being out in nature.
Mhm.
So those things shaped me more or less people. But then I have a huge influence in terms of like my mother. My mother raised me as a single mom, yet still pursued her career as an educator, as a public administrator. And she loved to travel. And for me, I just knew that that was something maybe I caught the travel bug from her
Mhm.
and said I wanted to be able to see the world and do work that influences the globe. And maybe without even really thinking about it, that might also have, spurred my interest in then focusing on global health. And whilst I was in Nigeria, once you finish medical school, you have to go serve within the community as part of your NYSC. And it was there during that time.
Sorry to interrupt you. So for those of you that are not Nigerian, NYSC is National Youth Service Corps. It's
Youth service.
the one
Yes,
youth
thank
service
you.
program you do after your college education, I believe. So yeah.
Yes, your college education. And then if you do go through professional training, you have to do like your internship to get your full certification
Mhm,
before you do that National Youth Service Corps,
mhm.
which involves some sort of like paramilitary training for 3 weeks before
Girl,
you then get posted
I
into
could do
like
I could do a whole podcast on my
you
NYSC
know all of
experience.
that, and the good thing about it is the premise of the program was supposed to allow for integration. So
Mhm,
if you were from the north, you ended up being posted to the south and vice versa. So you went to a part of the country you weren't from
mhm.
to enable you really integrate. And prior to security issues, it was a very laudable program, and I think a lot of people's lives changed for that.
Yeah.
So back to my story and how that was a defining moment for me professionally, and I would say in turn personally, was having been the only physician in a community clinic of about 45,000 people working with limited resources, having to take out retained placenta from a woman who had just given birth with no electricity, no surgical gloves. I just thought, I was like, I don't want to be part of the system without trying to fix something within the system.
Yeah.
I realized I was becoming apathetic as well. Is yes, they bring a patient to the emergency, no access to blood, there's nothing we can do, and then you just watch the patient just pass on.
You
So
feel helpless. Yeah.
that, yeah, exactly, you just get helpless, and then you become, for me, I started becoming apathetic.
Mhm.
And that was almost, I was in conflict with who I wanted to be and why I wanted to study medicine in the first place. So there was that pivot where I thought, okay, whilst it's great and it's a privilege to be able to care for patients one-on-one, I want to be able to influence the system at
Mhm,
a higher level. So
mhm.
that led me to pursue like my master's in health, master's in business administration and international healthcare management, because I thought, okay, maybe if I can influence health administration, I'll be able to do more, influence healthcare more upstream. But
Mhm.
even then, I still didn't know exactly what I was doing. I didn't have mentors who had told that path, because traditionally, once you're done, it's the clinical path. And
Yeah.
that was still something I was going to do. But anyway, so after that youth service corps, decided to go pursue stuff. And my journey has been, again, not linear. In the process, I've worked with nonprofits, I've worked with clinics, and I've just found myself in different opportunities just meeting me on the journey
Mm,
and me taking advantage of those opportunities. Like one key one was, I remember being on maternity leave. I was living and working in Ghana then.
okay.
And I was just applying to stuff. And I don't even remember to date applying to the Global Health Corps Fellowship, but I got it.
Mm,
And then I got to come do my Global Health Corps Fellowship in the US with Partners in Health PART project. And that was when I now understood global health. Because
mm.
prior to then, I didn't even know global health was a thing.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
got the chance to be exposed to the late Dr. Paul Farmer, worked on PIH projects. And for me, I was like, this is what I want to do with my time and my talent and my
Mm,
expertise. And
interesting.
since then, I have had the privilege again of working with several organizations, especially in different technical areas: global surgery, primary care, maternal newborn health resuscitation, really all focused on how to strengthen health systems.
It's funny. My like exposure to public health or global health as well actually came from listening to a PIH physician as well. I think he was a mentee of Dr. Paul Farmer, Dr. David Walton. And
Oh, I know Dr.
yeah,
David Walton.
and
Well,
he
I
was
met him.
actually
Yeah.
yeah, and he was actually a speaker at an event and at my college at the time. And I remember like listening to him talking about Haiti and all the work that PIH was doing in Haiti. And he talked about Dr. Farmer, and I was like, wow, this sounds so cool and so amazing. So that's kind of funny that we have that in common, I guess.
Absolutely.
So I wanted
Absolutely.
to maybe take a little step back because I think one of the key things that on this podcast I would like to explore with people when I get to know them or when I want them to share their stories is really this idea of identity and how does your identity shape you. So maybe just focusing on your Nigerian identity as an example, how do you think that that has shaped your career path and your worldview in general?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I think a lot of times we reflect on our identity and it's how we represent now, but sometimes you don't really think of how it shapes your worldview from the
Hmm.
past. So for me as a Nigerian, and I would say most Nigerians, again, we're huge people of faith. Maybe it's a thing,
Yeah.
culturally, we're very religious and stuff. So for me, that culture plus faith plus that drive in the Nigerian spirit has shaped how I want to show up in the world and try to make sure that wherever I find myself, I do the best I can.
Mm.
Over time, I think I've also learned, maybe just through maturity, where leadership isn't necessarily about being the most visible or the loudest person in the room, because I think that's attributed to Nigerians, but it's just making sure that your impact is known and felt
Mm.
in whatever shape or form and leading. So I think somehow that shapes us. Again, I think it's a thing of like nature versus nurture or whatever. Maybe we need to study the Nigerian gene. So that has helped me in terms of,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is I'm doing, whether it's as a parent, as a professional, as a volunteer in church, I want to give my best. And
Yeah.
I want to do my best because otherwise I'm asking myself, it's not worth doing at all.
Mm. Yeah. No,
Right? They say
I
Nigeria, no,
love
they
that.
carry last.
They
Yeah,
say
it's really not.
Nigeria, no, I almost want to say Nigerians don't carry last. Nigeria itself, I'm kind of on the fence.
Yeah, kind of
But,
like, but hey,
you
we are
know,
products of Nigeria, right?
that's very true. So we can't really, sometimes you can't
And we've
separate
been
yourself from it.
shaped by that.
But
Yes.
but yeah, I appreciate that. And I think even you talking about your, exposure to global health with Global Health Core and having that experience, I think, to me that sounds like maybe a pivotal moment in your work life. And so maybe can you talk about what that journey was like for you coming to the US and kind of starting that career here? And maybe
Hmm.
tell us some more about if it's challenging, like what was that like experience?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny because it was like I came to the US, then I went back to Ghana and then came back again for, totally different reasons. But one thing I would say is, because you did ask about challenges, I would also say sacrifices.
Yeah.
So when I came for my Global Health Core Fellowship, then I had a 6-month-old baby, my first child.
Wow. Okay.
So when I found, and like I told, I was on maternity leave, I still don't remember like actively applying. And then I was like, okay, I got this. I was like, what is this? This sounds exciting and stuff. And I clearly remember my husband saying, why don't you just go and take this position? You keep trying to figure out how you show up and what you want to do with medicine.
Mm.
Just go. And I found out I wasn't going to be able to take my kid just because it wasn't financially sustainable.
Wow.
It wasn't going to work out,
Right.
especially if I wanted to have the best experience with the fellowship again, not knowing what it would entail. So I made the difficult decision, because then we're living in Ghana, to take my almost 7-month-old baby to Nigeria to my mom.
Oh my
And I
God.
left him there to travel to the US. That is one of the hardest things I've done.
Wow.
But I reflect, that was over 14 years ago.
Hmm.
And that was a pivotal moment because it was a sacrifice I made then, even though the arrangement was just go, if you don't like it, come back.
Yeah.
Maybe that gave me some level of comfort. And I remember clearly my mom telling me, she said, I want to please take this opportunity, except you are telling me I will not be able to raise your kid.
Mm. That's
So
so.
maybe it was like the guilt trip, right? But
Yeah. She
honestly,
was
for
like,
me,
"Are you
that
saying I'm
just
not a good mother? Did I not raise you?"
but and I think that's again the
Yeah.
testament, like that whole Nigerian spirit, where it was like everybody was willing to rally around and be a
And I love
village
that.
and
Yeah.
say, take this opportunity.
Yeah.
We will do whatever it is you need to take that. And that honestly for me changed my trajectory. So I finished my 1 year global health core, but within that time where I was doing my global health core fellowship, I got the opportunity to take a certification course at the Harvard School of Public Health on global health effectiveness. So
Okay.
it just opened my mind and my eyes and increase my technical skills to again what I wanted to do. One of the first things when we talk about exposure to global health, for
Mm.
anyone who is curious about global health or interested in global health, I'll advise you to go read Mountains Beyond
Oh
Mountains,
yeah.
a
Yeah.
book by Tracy Kidder that talks about Paul Farmer's life.
Yeah.
If you like that, just again open my eyes. Or if you're more of like a movie person, watch the documentary Bending the Arc.
Yeah.
Those things. So for me, again, I was like, okay, this is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. So I finished my fellowship, went back to Ghana and was working. I had gotten a position with Sanford World Clinics, and that was the best experience because I was getting to use um, my clinical skills and expertise and my certifications. I'll say maybe 10-15% of the time, and the rest of my time was helping shape health systems, establishing, primary care clinics and all of that stuff. And it was perfect
Mhm.
till for family reasons, my husband he in turn, it was like, okay, it's my turn to go now, go explore my own thing. And he moved to the US, and I was like, really? But then after spending 1 year, and we were expecting a second kid, I had to make, for me, it was another difficult decision where I had to then move to the US just so that at least my family could be reunited. So that then started my journey
Hmm.
fully, full time in the US professional, because previously I'd come for a fellowship and gone back.
Right.
To then like exploring, okay, how do I also knew that I didn't want to dedicate time to going through residency and clinical medicine only to go back into global health again. So that was when I just gave up clinical medicine full time and focused on global health, and got an opportunity to work with organizations that focus on global surgery, maternal newborn health, joined Rotary, and do quite a bit of like volunteer work as either a board of advisor or board of director with some nonprofits.
I see. So, first of all, you've done a lot. So, like, it's a
It
lot.
sounds
It's a lot.
like it.
It doesn't sound like it. It is. It is. So I think one, obviously, be very proud of your accomplishments and your achievements, and even being able to navigate, like, being a mother, being a wife, having all these different journeys in combination. And I think we just, one, we need to appreciate our moms for even just stepping up, and just the communities around it, not just moms, but like our families, and stepping
The
up and
village. Yeah.
providing that village that the kids need. I don't have kids yet. God willing, that happens for me, but it's always something I think about, like, will that, like, having that village around you that will help
Mhm.
when things like this happen, where you have to pursue a career or pursue certain opportunities. So I think that's very good. I want to maybe shift a little bit and talk about maybe how all of this experience, so the work you've done, the exposure you've had, your clinical experience, all of that, like, how do you think it has maybe shaped your approach to leadership, like your leadership style? I know that you're someone that's held leadership positions in various organizations and in various capacities. So maybe can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I'll say for me, my experiences have shaped my leadership,
Mhm.
knowingly, unknowingly, and willingly and unwillingly at the
Right.
same time. As a physician, usually regardless of where you are in the stage of either your training or your practice, you are the de facto head of the clinical team.
Hmm.
So for me, I found myself thrust into leadership early, and I look back and I cringe at some of the things I did because I was not prepared for leadership.
Hmm.
And I made mistakes, or I would say like my leadership fails, but I'm grateful that I was able to fall forward. Hopefully the people I led that time would say the same. Is I just really understood that it was beyond technical skills, it was beyond know-how, that the ability to lead self and lead people, and then in turn lead systems,
Hmm.
required a lot more than what one just knew in terms of book
Right.
knowledge. It required empathy, it required understanding that it was a privilege to lead. And
Hmm.
that, one had to be, regardless of what leadership style people think, whether it's, authoritarian, whatever it is, but at the core of true and good leadership, it's a heart for the people that you're called to lead
Yeah.
and serve.
Yeah.
So for me, that has this whole journey and everything, I've had to find ways of leading self,
Hmm.
leading others when I've worked with teams, and then when I've been like heads of uh, departments or having to lead a major project, is now how did I lead other stakeholders as well as my team in order to influence change. And I
Right.
would say I've invested quite a bit in leadership development because no, well, maybe some people are born leaders, but not everybody really is, and that you have to truly, again, invest in leadership. So for me, that has also become a passion for me, where I'm focusing on leadership development as well, in addition to global health programming.
Yeah, and speaking of leadership development, one of the ways that we got a chance to really work together is through the Women Lift Health program, which we were
Yes.
both in cohort 2023. No,
2023 cohort. Yes,
yeah,
2023
2023.
cohort.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so shout out to Women Lift Health and
Shout out Women Lift Health. Woohoo.
so yeah, so I think maybe let's talk a little bit about challenges and resilience. So we are in a very interesting time in our career. And I can speak for myself, I'm sure you agree, but we see everything going on with the US funding freeze on global health, and the dismantling of USAID that's affected a lot of organizations. More importantly, it's impacted a lot of communities around the world that are really dependent on this support. So how are you personally feeling about it? I think, I can say for me, for the past, I guess now it's been 2 months So for the past 2 months, I've really just fluctuated between like sadness and despair and
Hmm.
resignation and sadness, and then maybe some level of like, you know what, what's next? Like what's next? So I think, want to hear maybe from you how you've been feeling, and then what are your concerns? And then on a positive side, what are your hopes? Like what can we maybe learn from this time?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great way to frame it in terms of how one is feeling, what the concerns, challenges are, as well as, what you see as opportunities or like the bright spots
Right.
in it. And it kind of like is akin to COVID, right? When COVID happened now about 5 years ago, where everything just shut down and people were confused and there was chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were getting bright messages of, okay, now at least the world were united. Then the disparities started showing up with like,
Mm-hmm.
COVAX and access to vaccines, and then who
Mm-hmm.
was dying and who wasn't, and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I think it's similar to that, where for those of us who are in international development, global health, whether your job has been directly impacted or not, you
Mm-hmm.
go through those motions where everything is just utter chaos right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to then dig deep and think, did you make the right decision? Like, going into this field, questioning your why.
Yeah.
Do you have to pay bills? So
Yeah.
so for me, I think I felt all of those things. I would also say one thing that maybe it's the Nigerian spirit again, the experience with COVID or faith is it cannot be this way. There has to be something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say honestly, I don't even know where, maybe just because I've kind of like sat in this for a while, is now seeing the opportunity. One of the things that I focused on in um, some work I've done is that whole concept of decolonizing global health and sustainable programming in terms of global health. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the things that we talked about now, we have to focus on those things. Is how can resource constrained settings be more self-sufficient? How do you rely less on, there's less donor dependency? How do you create systems? How do you encourage public-private sector partnerships? So a lot of these things now are coming to the table, and we're going to have to accelerate, the progress with those things. So I think that's like the bright spot and opportunities that I see in it, because those have long-term gains.
Yeah.
The challenges, though, are we weren't ready because some things had to be in place. There have to be some stopgap measures, and all of those measures were just, taken away. So unfortunately, there are going to be several deaths. There's going to be, backtracking on some of the progress we've made with the sustainable development goals and all of those things. And that's heartbreaking for anyone, whether you work in this sector or not directly.
Yeah.
But it's not losing sight within the chaos.
Yeah.
That for me is what drives me. Do not lose sight within the chaos, because the work is still there.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a great point, and I think just thinking about what you said, decolonizing global health, and I know
Mhm.
it's something we've been talking about for the past how many years, and that I
Over
feel
a
like
decade.
this just happened, and now it's like, oh my God, we really have to like now it's like by force, by fire, you
But
must decolonize
yes,
this global health,
yes, yes,
and I
yes.
think
You have
that's
no
what it's
option.
it's starting to look like. There's no other option. So even looking at organizations that were so dependent on USAID and US
Yeah.
government funding. Now you're just like, how do we figure out other ways to whether we're
How
doing
do
our
we
own
see?
income generation
Yeah.
or finding other funders nationally, right? So having
Yeah.
your own country start to fund some of these things so you're building more sustainability. But I think you're right. I think that we have to think about the hope. I mean, as a person of faith, whether you're a Christian or Muslim or whatever, you have to believe that there's something good that could come out of this, because what's the alternative? So,
Exactly. What's the alternative, right? And I'll say
uh,
one thing that has been a message for me in this phase, personally, professionally, from faith and all that, is just that word light.
mm,
So there are certain things that have carried me and keep coming to me is we have to be the light. Like Amanda Gorman's poem, and I quote it a lot of times, is for there is light at the end of the tunnel.
mm,
Only if we are brave enough to see it, only if we are brave enough to be it.
mm.
So we have to be and we have to see the light. Or the Bible that says a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Like,
Yeah.
let your light shine. Like, we have no option but to be the light. And that for me is my watchword right now is
Yeah.
we need the lights. There's so much chaos and darkness and, icky stuff. We have
Yeah.
to shine the light.
No, I so agree. And one of the things I really love about you, Maimuna, is your ability to do what you just did right now. Because I'll be honest, there are times where like, when we text on WhatsApp or anything, and I'll be just feeling like, oh my God, like this sucks and all that stuff. And then you say something, and I'm just like, she's so positive and so upbeat. And it's like, let me try and be like her. Like,
No,
maybe,
maybe if you come on video, my eyes would be like bloodshot red or something.
like, check it out this funky mood you're in. Like, everything's gonna be fine. So I always appreciate your positivity, even if you may not even be feeling it all the way, but I appreciate that you can vocalize it because I think that helps too. So I think maybe let's talk a little bit about if you weren't a physician or a public health professional, what else do you think you would be doing?
First of all, for the age where I am now, I'll be a retired athlete because I wouldn't be running in my thought. I know, right? Is one of the things I always wanted to do or be was an athlete, specifically an Olympic athlete.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, if I didn't study medicine or go down this path, if, like I said, retired, I might not have been successful. That's another thing because maybe
Oh.
I didn't even make it to the Olympics to start with. But I would have been in that field of like, sports or, I might have even done sports medicine, who knows? And
Hmm.
I think secondly is sometimes I think about it. Now all of us are forced to like again question our choices, right? Is I think I might have made a good lawyer. I don't know for sure, but
Okay.
again, that whole social justice, I just wouldn't be maybe high level corporate lawyer, but somebody who really wanted to speak up for, social justice and equity and equality,
So
maybe
ultimately, still in a role where you're causing or making impacts, and I think that,
impact.
yeah,
And I think for me, that's just I've understood that that's what drives me. That's my value as you dig deep into like the ikigai, right? Your passion, your mission, your profession, and your vocation, finding
mm,
somehow in the middle. I have to be able to make impact, whether it's organizing a Zoom session to celebrate a 40th birthday or gathering videos, those things really fuel me.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
had to be something like centered around that.
Yeah, and I think even in this time that's challenging for a lot of us, we need to find joy in those kind of things, right? We need to find
Absolutely.
ways to make ourselves happy. So I guess outside of work, you've talked about your being involved in church, you talked about your boys and your husband. I guess what are some things that bring you joy, um, outside of that?
Yeah, so recently, my husband and I got asked to like support with middle schoolers youth group in church. And for me, it has been very eye-opening as we get to engage with youth. Middle school is a hard time, I tell you. It's it's a hard time. And I don't know how the kids these days deal with the influence of technology and all of that. So for me, being in that space where we get to chat, we get to connect, you get to deal with like the mean girls, and you figure out how to have all of this
Good.
empathy as a leader. You're like, dear Lord, and then it's helping me see my kids in a different light and how they might be struggling with some things and maybe they just need somebody to chat with. And it's like how I'm creating space
Mm,
for them has fueled me. This is an anecdote that again talks about impact. It was one of those days a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, where I was just feeling like, what am I even doing with my life or myself? And there's one of the youth members of the youth group who I'm supposed to be mentoring and
mhm.
stuff. And I was initially, debating, but giving her feedback, like, when you text, because youth, they just send immediately, they'll send a text. I need this, I need that. Even my kids
Right.
sometimes they do it. And I was like, how about start with good morning or
Yeah.
hello
Hello,
and
how are
stuff. I know,
you?
how are you? I would like this. So anyway, I said that and I was really debating. I was like, okay, I don't want to be, come across as, too serious or so. But I found a way of saying it. The next week, it was a time again when I was just, wondering about. And she texted and she was like, oh, hi, Miss Maimuna, how are you? I just wanted to ask. Honestly, there was a huge smile on my face that day. And I thought,
Learn.
even if I haven't done anything,
Hmm.
I have helped somebody to just understand how to communicate. It's the little
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
right? So that has fueled, or at least gives me something to do where I'm always thinking about how to keep up with the youth, how to engage with them. So many people are struggling with all kinds of stuff.
It's so
Figure
true.
out how to be like that sounding board, yeah, for them as
Yeah.
well. I mentioned I'm a Rotarian, so
Yeah.
I sit on the board of the International Rotary Fellowship of Healthcare Professionals. So I'm able to volunteer my time with that as well.
Okay.
So it's just again, I think one thing this has taught me is we are the sum of many parts.
Mm.
And you don't have to only manifest, again, when you think about the ikigai, your passions and your values and your virtues in one
Area.
bucket or
Yes.
within one
Yes.
organization. You find a way to fulfill it in every
Yeah.
area. Yeah.
And I think sometimes, when we are working for particular organizations, we tend to tie our identity to that
With the
organization. And
organization.
even sometimes the organization is, telling you, don't say this in a public forum. And you have to, to almost minimize yourself to fit within this big organization. Not to say that, obviously there's some things you have to be mindful of, but I think what you're saying is right, is that we need to figure out who we are beyond our work titles and
Beyond our
the
titles.
jobs
Yeah.
that we do. So I
Yeah.
guess, as we're starting to round out, maybe one of the last questions I'll ask is, what advice would you give someone that's trying to build a life and a career that's rooted in impact and service, especially in a time like this where we have all these challenges? What do you think?
Yeah, and that's a loaded question because honestly, we're all in different places, right? Even when you talk about those of us that are impacted, there are some people where it's a two-member family and they're both out of work. They
Mm.
have to find something, they have to pay bills. It's so I think it's important to understand one's finances or one's situation. Again, I keep throwing the ikigai, right? Is like what your passion, your mission is, what
Mm.
your profession and your vocation is, what you are good at, what you can get paid for, what you are good at and what others need from you and all of those things. It's really know your why and where you sit at the core of it and understand your situation so that maybe you might find yourself where you have to take a corporate job and it pays the bills, but you find another avenue or platform where you share your passion and your mission, and
Yeah.
you find whether it's a creative outlet or whatever it is, you just have so again, it's know your why, know who you are, what you bring to the table, and then figure out ways to manifest those things, or maybe like kind of like utilize, figure out a way to make impact
Mm. Mm.
in whatever way it makes sense to you
Yeah.
and your family situation, because that would help. A
Yeah.
lot of times people think you only have to work within like the social impact space. That might not necessarily be what works for you or what is, beneficial for your family or your situation at that time. But
Yeah.
you can still make impact outside of, again, your job, what you volunteer with, or you start your own, organization, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's true. I think ultimately be smart, figure out a way to get your bills paid, and
Figure out a way to get your
yeah,
bills.
yeah,
Yes. But
and
don't tie your identity to any one thing, because your value, your purpose, your talents, your skills, you can have different ways of manifesting them.
yeah. Okay, well, I love that. And then final question, because I'm going to ask this to all my guests, is what do you think is the theme song of your life right now?
Right now, that is a really good question to ask. Theme song. I've talked about light, so I would say maybe any song that speaks about light will be helpful for me. One of my favorite songs, and this is from before, is Masterpiece by Jessie J.
Okay.
And it talks about how, I fall on my face sometimes. I'm still working, I'm incomplete and all of that stuff. And I think that still carries through. Is that whole process of evolution and lifelong learning and evolving and figuring out how to adapt, how to be resilient is helpful. But again, like I said, I can't think of a particular song, but light.
Light.
Light is really
Anything
shining
with
through
light.
for me.
Perfect.
Anything with light. Be
All
the
right.
light.
Sounds
Yes.
good. Well, Maimuna, thank you so much for joining us on Rooted and
Thank you for
Rising
having me,
today. It
Chama.
was lovely chatting with you. And you all feel free to reach out to Maimuna on LinkedIn. She's very active. I'll post it on the podcast notes. But thank you again and wishing you all the best luck in everything that you do.